Last year, during the whole killer clown craze, a few clowns on Twitter threatened to come to our school at 11 a.m. and kill us. The school picked up on this and sent out emails to parents and planned a lockdown at 10:30. Sitting in history class, I heard the familiar sound of the lockdown alarm, the teacher rushing to the windows and door, locking and closing them. To be honest, I wasn't that worried. I thought that it was just another blank thread online and nothing would happen and my day would go back to normal. But there's still an air of excitement to a lockdown. After 40 minutes of silence, sitting on the cold floor in the corner of the room, the emergency green flashing light turned off and the air conditioning slowly fell silent and the hallway light switched off. The school had cut the power. Why though? At this point, me and my classmates were staring at each other. We all knew that something real was going on. After 10 minutes or so, we could all hear a faint banging noise from down the corridor, shortly followed by heavy and fast footsteps. Someone was running down the hallway. They started banging on the lockers and screamed, "I'll kill you all, just die." At this point, a few girls started quietly crying. Then the most terrifying thing ever happened. One of the men, dressed as a clown, ran up to my class door, banging and screaming. Multiple people were crying now. One of my friends whispered to me, "We're all gonna die." I started crying too. The man swiftly moved away from our door, and his screams slowly faded down the corridor. After another 2 hours, the principal came on the loudspeaker, surprisingly explaining everything. He said that just after 11, 2 men walked into the school, one holding a kitchen knife and a camera. They ran around the school, threatening to kill students, and once police raided the school, they only caught one. No one was hurt. The school got over 20 buses to take the younger kids home, and the kids 9th grade and over, like me, were told to walk home in groups and call the cops if we saw anything suspicious. I had a hard week at school, thinking that the second man would return with a gun or something, but nothing happened. This, nonetheless, would be scarred into my life forever. The second one, as far as I know, hasn't yet been caught, but at this point, I feel like they're not looking for him, as it's been over a year. But the thought of him still planning an attack on the school has made me a lot more cautious when walking to school. Since then, the school has hired a few on-campus police officers and have installed some auto-locking features on doors and windows. When the lockdown alarm goes off, this has made me feel a little bit better in school. But this isn't just something that you can forget about. It stays around forever. I, a 17-year-old male, go to a high school near a forest that the school forbids us to visit. My friends and I have always wanted to see what secrets lie behind those big tall trees. We've planned to sneak into the forest just before school on Thursday. It's currently Wednesday, so tomorrow will be a game changer. School was just about to end when our classroom doors locked. They were sealed shut. I stood up to see everyone in shock, and the teacher was trying to calm down a crying guy. A few minutes later, while trying to calm everyone down, we heard screams of agony. I rushed to look out the window, but before I could see anything, my teacher stepped in front of me and told me that it's better if I don't see. I sat down, curious about what had caused that guy so much pain that he had to scream. The classroom became deadly silent. Still lost in my thoughts about the screaming, my eyes became heavy, and I closed them for a while. I was awoken by another scream, followed by more, and then a loud bang. I then pushed my way through the crowd of students to the window, and what I saw next horrified not just me, but everyone who stood and looked out the window. We were all petrified, wondering what could happen to us if we could be its next victims. I saw this thing. I have no idea what it's called. It had long black hair, was covered in blood, with blood dripping from its mouth, and it wore a white dress that came to its knees and had holes in it. You could see it had been severely injured. As it saw its next victim running down the hallway, it screeched and ran on all fours. Its head faced backwards. It chased after the guy from class 8. I knew him. He was in my gym class. I sadly had to watch him slowly get devoured by the creature. I tugged on my friend's shirt and told him to see what was happening. All he said in return was, "It can sense us. We're next." I felt shivers throughout my body. I felt my legs go numb. I heard a loud knock 3 times before it was dead silent. Everyone was petrified by what could happen. The guy who was crying suddenly stopped and turned to face the door. "I do not have a good feeling about this," he said to his girlfriend, whose fear was visible on her face. The one window that was open suddenly closed. It was strange because no one was anywhere near that window. I could feel something was off, but I had no idea what. I reached down for a chair, ready to throw it at anything that came into the classroom. After seconds of having all that fear and anxiousness built up inside us, it had finally entered. As it walked, the air was heavy, and the room started to smell like a rotting corpse. It turned to look at the guy and his girlfriend. Its face was pale white. I didn't dare look it in its eyes, but they did. It screeched and ran at them. The way it ran made me want to puke. It looked very disturbing. I watched in horror as the creature slowly devoured them. I grabbed my friend and ran out of the classroom. We both looked at each other when we reached the hallway, our eyes wide open from what we were witnessing. Dead bodies were lying all over the hallway. How could one creature eat so much? Unless there was more. My friend, still standing there in shock, let out a scream, which he shouldn't have done. The creature bolted across the room, leaving the couple behind, and took my friend in its hands, munching on him. I slowly but softly went back into the classroom, trying my best not to let out loud sobs as I watched the monster eat him piece by piece. He screamed loudly and cried out for help, but there was absolutely nothing I could do. With tears streaming down my face, I gradually closed the door. I walked to the corner of the room and sobbed softly. The teacher called us all and told us something upsetting and very shocking. This information I'm about to disclose has to be the most crucial part of what's happening. He told us this happens every 20 years. This creature lives in the forest, and that's why we're forbidden to enter it. He also said it feeds on students of this school as revenge for building the school on its homeland. The creature was a human that had been bitten by some other entity. We can't fully explain the origin of the creature. There are some secrets better left unknown. We have still yet to find out what and where this entity is. I asked how to escape, but all the teacher had in response was, "There's no escape. Just be quiet and don't look it in the eye, and it won't attack you unless it's extremely hungry." I'm currently writing this while sitting in the classroom, still hearing it munching on other students, not caring about their screams. I have no idea how to cope with all these noises. I'm starting to lose hope, wondering if we'll ever get out. Everyone in the class is dead except me and one other guy who looks like he's about to burst out crying. Can't get out of here yet. Have to wait. I've been waiting for 3 days and 17 hours. I have no hope left. I still have no explanation for anything, but being here for 3 days is taking a toll on my health. I just want to leave. I'm very happy I'm not in school anymore. I graduated a few years ago, but more and more every day, I hear about incidents at school, on the news, on the internet, in texts my friends send me, all sorts of horror stories. But the stories online are the ones I'm always finding myself glancing through. I've seen stories online of people relating how their school went into lockdown, and the story ends up being about some hobo who's been living under the school, or some crazy person from down the street who finally snapped one day. I don't know if they're true, but all I know is our school went into lockdown once. And I don't know if even the people at my school know the whole story as to what happened. I don't even know if I understand it myself. It still seems like a sort of fever dream, something that didn't happen, couldn't happen. It was the middle of third period math. I just finished a big test. I found out later I'd made a bunch of mistakes and ended up getting a D, but that's not really important to the story. I used the hall pass to go to the bathroom. Unfortunately, the school bathrooms were all located at the stairwells, and of course, the bathrooms on the first floor, where I was, were closed for repairs. I had to go up to the second floor, but before I got there, the bell rang. The bell never rang during class before, but as it did, an announcement came over the PA. Students and faculty were entering lockdown. This is not a drill. Please, all students and faculty follow all school procedures. I froze. I could hear sirens approaching. I came out of the stairwell, but already the doors in the hallway were closing, and I could hear them locking. I was alone and out in the open. I could go into the bathroom now, but the doors had no locks on them since my freshman year. After some juniors trapped a freshman in the bathroom and duct taped him inside a stall, they removed the ability to lock them at all. If there was somebody wandering the school, I'd have no chance if I went into there. I ran down the hall. I could see classrooms turning out their lights and covering the windows. I couldn't turn to them for help. All the instructions said to not answer the door. I had to find someplace safe nearby before something happened. I turned a corner and saw my chance. The janitor's closet was open. Lunch was up next period, so he was probably out setting up tables when the announcement was made. He wasn't in there, and it could easily be locked from the inside, so I jumped in and shut off the light. The only light I saw was from the bottom of the door. I waited, and the sirens grew closer and eventually stopped. Time passed, and I wasn't sure if I was happy that I couldn't hear anything going on, or tense because I had no idea what was happening. Then I heard footsteps, lots of them. They stopped in the hallway. It must have been police. I could hear radios and other assorted noises. I didn't think it could be some sort of lone gunman or nutcase, so I listened. One guy in particular sounded like the one in charge. "Okay, are we in position?" Another guy answered. I don't know what his rank was, but clearly he was not in charge of the first guy. "Yes, sir, we know the suspect is here in the building. C team is across the campus as ordered, and B team is covering the back entrances. He will not exit the building on our watch," the chief responded. "Good. Remember, he could look like anyone, but he must not escape. It's my fault he's here, and it's my duty to deal with him." I couldn't hear much for a while. There was too much movement, too many people all talking to each other to make out anybody from where I sat. I just waited for a while. Maybe it would all just be over soon, and I could leave the closet and go back to class. Then that's when it all happened. The chief yelled out, "Hold it! Put your hands in the air!" The commotion outside stopped abruptly. A moment later, clothes rustled loudly as what sounded like a large number of guns were drawn. "Lay down on the ground. Leave your hands where we can see them." It stayed quiet, except for a few of the guns cocking. I said down on the ground. "Don't you dare try what I think you're going to do. You're not at the institute anymore." I thought I would hear shots go off, back and forth, and eventually somebody saying suspect down. What I didn't expect was the scream. It wasn't a normal scream. It wasn't somebody crying out in terror. It was like a wounded animal mixed with the sound of a bandsaw hitting concrete. I've never heard anything like it before, and I hope I never hear it again. Then the guns began to fire. The horrible scream happened again, and then other screams, and then the sounds of tearing. I saw the shadows under the door as people moved and fell over, and heard the telltale splatter of gore as it soaked the floor. There was another gunshot, and I nearly yelled out myself when a bullet punched through part of the doorway. It wasn't very big, but I put my eye up against it, and I could see a group of people being attacked by somebody. But something wasn't right about it. He looked too long in places, like he'd been stretched in a taffy machine. He was moving so fast, though, that I couldn't make anything out, except for him grabbing people and throwing them around like they were nothing. There was blood everywhere. More gunshots. The scream happened again and again. I pulled away from the bullet hole and sat back down in the closet. Then the scream began to fade. I heard a thud and then more footsteps. The chief spoke again, but he was breathing heavily like he'd been badly wounded. "Team A, he's down. I repeat, he's down. We need to clean up immediately." I didn't move. I wanted to look again, but as curious as I was, I didn't really want to see. But I heard a lot of commotion for a long time, and then nothing. I didn't know how long it was after that, but then the PA announced the lockdown had ended. I came out of the closet. I tried not to look, but for all the sounds that I'd heard, there was not as much sign of a fight as I thought there'd be. Even the blood I'd seen in that brief time through the bullet hole had all been removed. I went back to my class and just told everyone that I'd hid in a stall in the bathroom. People were impressed with my guts for doing it, but if nobody else had heard that scream, I certainly didn't want to bring it up. As you might expect, we all went home early that day. Police and EMT were everywhere, but as far as I could see, nobody was being taken away by either. My parents came and were so happy that I was all right. They'd been following everything on the news and came as soon as they could. At home that night, I ate dinner and waited to see what happened on the news. The live coverage had ended a long time ago, but when the news came back on at 10, I wanted to see everything. As it started, I saw classes had been canceled for the rest of the week, but then things started to get weird. The news talked about a student who they refused to name, how he'd come to school armed, but had been taken into custody after a short firefight. Stranger still, in the footage of the hallway where the scuffle had taken place, the door of the closet, which had been my refuge, was totally unscathed. Not so much as a scratch on it, let alone bullet holes. It appeared to have been replaced outright, well before any investigation could have been completed. I saw pictures of the student being led away in cuffs. He didn't have a mark on him. He wasn't even wounded as he was pushed into a police car and driven away. All I saw was him fighting and yelling. Even in my glimpses through the bullet hole, I knew that wasn't the same one I saw. The clothes were completely different. The one I'd seen had been wearing a black t-shirt and jeans. The one getting into the police car was wearing a white shirt and shorts. The news said no one had been hurt despite the gunfire, but I knew people had been wounded, even killed. I'd heard them screaming in agony as something vicious had attacked them. And then there was what that chief guy had said, talking about something being his fault, the institution, that he could look like anyone. I don't know what happened that day for certain. I didn't see enough, I didn't hear enough to get the full story, but this is what I can tell you. I know that there was no shooter at our school. I know that someone was arrested that day, someone who I didn't know, who I never heard about ever again. That's right, a shooter who never made another day's worth of news, just disappeared. When was the last time that ever happened? I know that chief guy and his squads were not cops. I don't know who they were, but I know cops don't clean up a crime scene like that. And no human being has ever screamed like that, ever. But whatever it was that I heard attacking those people, all I know is it came into that hallway where I was. I was alone, and if it hadn't been for that janitor's closet, I wouldn't have been safe. It could have looked like anyone. Something tells me that squad wouldn't have helped me either. It could have looked like anyone. What was it? How long had it been in our school? Had I ever been alone with it and never knew what it was? Who were those people who'd come for it? Where had it come from? And, good God, is it really dead?